Hi, I'm Karen Magruder. I'm an assistant professor of practice in the School of Social Work, and I wish I could be there in person with you all, but I am thankful for the opportunity to present remotely and for all of your support. So I was told I could either do a PowerPoint or just speak, and since I wasn't sure how big I would be on your screen, I thought it might be nice just to talk about my experiences. So I'll start by telling you a little bit of background about what I did. So I was fortunate to get the green light, no pun intended, to integrate the SDGs into two of my courses. So the first one was an environmental justice and green social work course. And obviously, this had some pretty clear parallels to sustainability. And indeed, I was able to actually infuse 14 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals into the curriculum. And one thing that was special about this class is that I did this work for fans concurrently with also getting this course reviewed by Quality Matters, which is a system to basically certify courses that have passed a rigorous review of best practices in online education. And it did pass. And so that was nice to be able to do those all together and get that in before the full review process. And the other class I worked on as a FANS fellow was a graduate level human behavior in the social environment. And it's based on human behavior and lifespan development theories. So in social work, we often see things like mental health concerns not just as a biological or psychological issue, but we consider the whole person within the context of their environment. But too often, we speak about the social environment, things like politics and economic environments, but we forget about the natural or built environments. And so part of my efforts on this class was centered around seeing how the environment impacts us and vice versa. So I was asked to talk a little bit about some challenges and then lessons learned. So one challenge that I faced initially was trying to conceptualize how to integrate all of this material in a way that seemed seamless and not disjointed. So with the human behavior class, the curriculum was kind of already set in many ways. It had a pretty robust master syllabus. And so trying to develop and infuse this additional content without it just seeming like a random tack on or an afterthought was something that I had to be really intentional and creative about. And similarly, I didn't want to just give too much to overwhelm students. I am sure some of y'all relate that I get passionate and excited about something, and I'm like, you need to read this article and watch this video, and we need to have this discussion. And being able to prioritize to be able to enrich their learning without it being so much that they'd be so overwhelmed and skip some of the material altogether and not get any benefit from it. A few insights or lessons learned. First was the applicability of the SDGs to so many topics, and it was actually easier than I thought to find several modules that connected very well and that I didn't have to do any mental gymnastics to draw connections. It was truly relevant, even in social sciences, the course that was not necessarily a directly environmental class to begin with, which is kind of the idea of this project, I think. So I guess encouraging those that might not see an obvious connection to realize that those connections are there when you look for them. Another one was related to the use of OER, open education resources. So for my environmental justice course, I was also fortunate to be the recipient of an OER grant through the UTA libraries, like their CARES grant program, which meant that all the readings were free to students online. There was no textbook that they had to purchase. And in addition to making this course then more affordable and therefore more accessible to students who had tight finances, the lack of a physical book meant that we also reduced our carbon footprint as a class and just did everything online, which was nice. I definitely saw that passion and enthusiasm were really important for students, and that I'm sure you all have seen this too, but students care when you care. And I may be preaching to the choir, but I think it's worth noting that part of my success in having positive student feedback from these courses after completing the fellowship was helping students to embrace these concepts by really being obvious about my excitement and enthusiasm for the topics. And so I have a student quote that I will share here with permission. On student feedback surveys, they said Professor Magruder was highly passionate about the course materials. Her passion was evident and overflowed throughout her lectures, extra resources, and availability. So not just kind of putting in this info, but also being excited about it and giving extra resources on topics that people might want to dive deeper in and being available to discuss those things with them. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about is connections and relevance. So students were more engaged in the SDG content when I could make connections between what they were learning in the course and how they could apply that to make a difference in the real world. For example, in the human behavior class, we learned about theoretical frameworks behind social movements. And it might sound cool, but actually kind of dry, talking about some of the psychological theories behind some of these concepts. And it was more exciting when they could apply it to what Greta Thunberg had been doing, or having students do presentations about people like Rachel Carson or Robert Bullard and how their work applies to social work today. So being able to say, here's what we're learning in your textbook, here's how this applies with a sustainability frame, and here's how learning this is going to help you in your career and being able to help people and serve and make a difference. I continue to be really impressed with how students really run with it when you give them the space to take action on the things that they care about. So the students in my environmental justice class had a project where they had to identify an environmental issue and a vulnerable or marginalized population that was disproportionately impacted by that issue, and then take action on it and do something about it. And I had students doing all sorts of creative things, like writing blogs and posting YouTube videos and writing letters to their legislators and volunteering, doing trash cleanup or tree planting. And I had one student make a comment that I thought really illustrated this well on a discussion board. The student said, "Just a month ago, the scope of my environmental knowledge was limited. Melting ice caps, garbage islands, severe weather, Florida underwater, that girl from Sweden, Tesla, Al Gore, and a political party denying science. That's about it. When I started this, I was dead set on specializing in counseling and substance use disorders. A few videos and a PowerPoint later, I'm ready to go march. Even after registering for this class, I still had no idea how social work and the Green New Deal stuff intersected. But now it makes perfect sense. Environmental justice and social work values are pretty parallel. They both use systems theory and require activism. Fighting to save the planet is really no different than fighting for human rights. And let's face it, human rights means squat if there's no planet to exercise those rights on." So you can imagine feeling good about students really being able to see some of those connections between things. And my final takeaway is that our fans fellow cohort is awesome. I learned, just so much from networking with everybody. I was really inspired by the creativity and vision and hard work that my peers did. And this wasn't really something I learned necessarily, but was rather reminded and encouraged by UTA's support of sustainability initiatives and our commitment to sustainability, and just found that very fulfilling to me as well. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and hope this was helpful.